the moment it really starts getting there, it starts getting serious, they get cold feet, then they start taking a few steps back. They're not as sure anymore. Sometimes this behavior is conscious, sometimes it's not conscious. In fact, a lot of times it's not conscious. People walk into therapy and they're like, I don't know what am I doing? My relationship is going just fine. And then suddenly I started feeling withdrawn from my partner.
Pour the Heart Out. Episode 7, Commitment Issues.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Pour the Heart Out. We're so sorry we're back after almost a break, but it's been a good break. And so today we're back with a very interesting topic, something that invokes a lot of anxiety in a lot of people, something that we've all been questioning for so long. We're talking about commitment issues today. We're going to try to understand what goes on in their mind. We're going to try to understand why they develop and what we can do about it. Once again, we have with us the wonderful Praneet Kaur, who's a counseling psychologist and a relationship expert. So to begin with, Praneet, let's start by understanding that what our behavior can be characterized under, being having commitment issues.
Right. So, first of all, to understand that commitment can be a very subjective term, and the levels of commitment varies across different couples. If I am in a relationship where I've laid it out that I want a commitment, which means that I want both of us to be loyal to each other for as long as we're together, for as long as it works out. For another couple, commitment could mean getting together and being together for the rest of the time. For another couple, commitment can mean marrying each other. So, first off, it's subjective, and to understand that you and your partner are on the same page when it comes to the definition of commitment, that's important because there is no universal definition for it. Now, about the behaviors that are considered to be behaviors that show that this person is going through commitment issues is basically when the partner is not giving commitment. Now, sometimes it's very outrightly there, that one of the partners is looking for that kind of commitment and they're asking the partner, where do you see us going? What do you think about us? And they simply tell them that um, I want something casual. So there is very outrightly saying that I don't want commitment. Now, when a person is already saying it, there isn't so much as commitment issues, but them being okay with not wanting to give commitment and them being aware of the fact that I don't want to give commitment. So, when is it that we start calling it commitment issues? It's when the person themselves is not quite clear as to what do I want, when they perhaps start to show inconsistent behavior. So there are times when they look very drawn towards the partner, they look very involved, they want that deep connection themselves, and they want both the partners to share everything with each other, and there is that yearning to be together in the long term as well. However, the moment it really starts getting there, it starts getting serious, they get cold feet, then they start taking a few steps back. They're not as sure anymore. Sometimes this behavior is conscious, sometimes it's not conscious. In fact, a lot of times it's not conscious. People walk into therapy and they're like, I don't know what am I doing? My relationship is going just fine. And then suddenly I started feeling withdrawn from my partner. So this is something that we call as self-sabotage behavior, that your relationship is going just fine and then you do something because of which it gets affected, and the equation is not as solid anymore. So that's one inconsistent behavior. Then there is when a person sees that it's getting serious, and because they don't want to get too attached, they don't want to commit, they start to talk to many people at a time. A lot of people who come to me in therapy have this notion that if we talk to more than one person at a time, we won't develop very strong feelings for one person. So they think it's a safe place to be in, as if committing to one person or developing stronger feelings feels unsafe to them, right? So this is another manifestation of having commitment issues, where we're basically running away from that sort of an intimacy, And to run away from it, we pour into a lot of these relationships, at the same time. Now we can do this openly, where all the partners are aware that this is happening and that it's casual, or it can happen in the form of infidelity, right? Then there is a partner just very evidently running away from responsibilities of the relationship. So they can very well be in the relationship, committal, no third person in the picture. They're talking about future and stuff, but the moment it becomes real, that, oh, we're committing, we're together, and we now have to take responsibility of each other. That means that we're not going to be together only in good times and only when we're having fun, but we're also going to have to be there for each other when the times are not so rosy, when we're having conflicts. We're answerable to each other, we have to factor each other in. We're no more a person who can just really go around living their life, not being responsible or accountable to another person, versus when they are single and they have the liberty to do that, right? So this starts to look like a burden to them instead of looking at it as a responsibility and wanting to take it up willingly. And that's when they start to run away from their partner. And a lot of times they end up blaming their partner, saying things like, you're expecting too much, you're being too much, you're trying to clip my wings, you're not letting me be, you're too dependent, which can very well be the case. But a lot of times people also use these things. Basically, they attack their partner in order to control their behavior. Which behavior? The part of their behavior that demands this person to act responsibly. Again, this can happen on a more conscious level. It can also happen on a rather more unconscious level, where the person is absolutely not aware that they're repeatedly trying to attack their partner in a way that they don't have to take responsibility for their life, their emotions. Another behavior can be where people shy away from being vulnerable. That you're bringing to the table your absolute vulnerable self as my partner. You're talking to me about everything that has affected you, that you think may affect you. You're telling me about some really dark secrets of your life. You're showing me your worst self. You're showing me your broken self. And it starts to scare me. And I'm like, oh God, this is too much for me to handle. I can't do that. And every time that you're vulnerable with them, they get very uncomfortable. They don't know how to handle that. And they try to run away from that, let alone being vulnerable themselves. They can't handle it when you're vulnerable. Again, this is something that can also come from a place where they've perhaps been brought up by a set of parents who were not very comfortable with emotions themselves. So that kind of behavior was never modeled, where you can sit with another person while they're being sensitive about something, while they're crying about something. So it can very well be that. But when this behavior is coupled with all the other behaviors that we talked about, inconsistent behavior, not wanting to take responsibility, just wanting to keep it light and funny and all fun and games, and the moment it gets serious or responsibility taking, we don't want to deal with it. So that's where we kind of say that we want to stay, or the person wants to stay in the dating phase, right, where there is only fun and nothing else that you are going to have to deal with. So when people have problem with vulnerability in this manner with their partner, what they end up doing is that they end up going from one relationship to another, and they stay in one relationship only up until that honeymoon phase lasts. The moment the honeymoon phase of that relationship is over, they're not comfortable in that relationship anymore. And that's when they start to look for a new relationship where they can find the same thing now. Um, Other than that, there are some people who, because they're so scared of commitment, or they think that they will lose their mind perhaps, or get out of control if they commit to a person too much. So they convince themselves that they're actually very happy being alone, and they pretend to be more comfortable with aloofness and solitude, definitely a lot more than they actually are. Because the thing is that we as humans do need connection, we do need other people to confide in, and we cannot be in the state of ultimate loneliness forever. We can have those phases, sure, but we definitely want to go back to that sort of belongingness and connection. But people who might fear away from commitment, they people who fear away from commitment might show that they're extremely comfortable with that ultimate state of aloofness, and they're absolutely okay with it. And in a relationship, they might go back into their shell every now and then, and when asked that, where are you, what's happening, why are you disappearing, they say things like, I want my space. um, I like to be on my own. I do this every now and then. I just disappear. That's how I am. I like being on my own. I'm kind of a loner. This is one term that is used as a justification of having commitment issues a lot. It's quite in, it's the new fad in relationships today, that I'm a loner. And there's a certain kind of pride that we take in saying that. Um, However, being alone and loneliness affects these people just as much as it affects anyone else. But the way that they sit with these feelings, the way that they work around them, the way that they express these feelings can be different because they're in denial of feeling this way. And lastly, basically, overall, you will see people who have commitment issues to genuinely want to be in a relationship, have that warmth, have that intimacy being exchanged, and you would be like, this person is so loving and this person just wants exactly what I want. And then suddenly one day, the switch will happen, and you'll feel that earlier it was them who was coming towards me. And the moment I also started going towards them, they started running away. And then you, who is at the receiving end of such a treatment, are really confused. You don't know what they're up to. So, this going towards and then running away is the classic behavior of anyone who might have commitment issues. So, these are some of the behaviors.
Right. And we spoke about the behaviors, we spoke about what happens on the outside. Now let's talk about what happens on the inside.
In the mind of someone who has commitment issues, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of insecurities, there's a lot of fear of losing control. These are the people who want to have a very strong command and a very strong hold on their own emotions, themselves. There can be various reasons behind that we can take up as we go forward. But ultimately, for most part, commitment issues come from the place of fear, insecurity, fear of rejection, fear of being abandoned, and insecurities that they may have regarding themselves. They may not feel very secure in their own body, in their own skin. They may think that they're not worthy of love. They're not worthy of having a good person in their life, and perhaps commitment is not for them. They shouldn't commit to another person and ruin their life. So a lot of times this kind of narrative also comes up. um, in the mind of someone who fears commitment, there is also a lot of fear of being vulnerable. Vulnerability looks like a place where they basically will lose themselves completely, and they will put themselves in a position where it'll be very easy for the other person to take advantage of them. There are certain experiences in the past that make them develop this fear. And so, another thing about these people is that they will have, or at least pretend to have, a very strong exterior. People who are unaffected by anything in the world, and they're like the always in that stoic state where nothing affects them. They're walking robots who can invest, connect, be there, and then immediately disconnect when needed, and they're unaffected by it all. So they wear this mask not just for other people, but for themselves as well. It's the way they decide to safeguard, like I said, the insecurities that they carry. So safeguard themselves from those insecurities, from those fears. So it's basically safe to say that they basically try to build a wall around themselves, and that wall is built so strongly. It's so thick and it's so high that no one can trespass that wall. And Even though it can be lonely to be inside of that wall all by themselves, it feels safer to be in that position. So they'd rather be in a safe position than to put themselves out there and experience the joy of connection and belongingness. That can be fun to them, and that's why they have this inconsistent behavior where they go towards it only because a part of them also wants it. But the fear is much more greater than the anticipation of that joy. The fear that I will lose myself, that I will be rejected, that I can put myself in a place where what this person says or does starts to affect me and I can't afford that. So, yeah, that's the state of someone who is going through commitment issues.
And how do these feelings and how do these issues develop? Like, let's probably trace it back and understand how this develops.
Right. So, a lot of it definitely goes back to what were your earlier attachments like when you were a child? Um, what was the relationship like between your parents? What is it that you've seen being modeled when it comes to relationships in your family by your immediate caregivers? So, like I said, that at the core of it, of commitment issues, there is a deep-seated fear, and that fear is of various types. So, we can perhaps divide it into three fears. There is one that is that there is a fear of going crazy, how they say, or completely losing my mind, or not being able to control my emotions. So there is that fear that if I commit to someone, I will be all in, and that's a scary place to be in. You know, I will get dependent, or the other person will get dependent, and we will have very intense emotions. And when you do that, when you have such intense emotions, you lose yourself. This is the kind of notion that they carry. Now, where does this notion come from? This notion comes from looking at the set of parents that have brought you up, or any adult caregivers around you who've not modeled the best of emotional health, where they were managing their emotions in a very ill manner. And what this child has always seen growing up is that emotions are a bad place to be in. Once you are emotional, you are a wreck. There is no continuum. So there is either no emotions or you're a wreck. There is like no midway. It's black and white. There is no gray area. So there is that constant fear that if I start to tap into my emotions will overpower me, and they will start overflooding, and then nothing will be in my control, and then I would not know anymore how to navigate through that situation. This is the classic case where people think, and men by and large experience this more than women do, because culturally men are trained in this manner that whenever we also see male characters in movies, we always see that they'll either be very cold, they'll have no emotions whatsoever, or they will be so high on their emotions that rationality will go for a toss. They would not think logically. They would want to own the person, they would fight for it, they would kill for it, they would kill themselves for it, and they would do everything that they can. So every desire will take over and they will be uncontrollable. That's the kind of image that we paint. So that's the kind of image that we paint in our films, and that's exactly what these children see happening in their families as well. What are the male role models in the family doing? They're cold, they're stern, they don't feel anything, they're very indifferent. And then suddenly they'll come home, they will be very angry and they'll start scolding everyone, they'll become very hostile. So that's the image of a male figure in the family, right? And it's not always the case that this is happening only with the male parent. A lot of times, even a female parent can manifest the same behavior, and children, they notice and they learn, and that's where their scripts get formed. So if you're someone whose family has not modeled the most healthy emotions in the most healthy way, then you're going to be someone who's going to be terribly scared of being in that position where you're feeling too much. And we all know what is that one place where you feel too much? When you're in love. So that's one fear, that I will lose my mind, my emotions will take over. The second fear is that if I come across as too needy, this person may reject me, right? If I come across as someone who wants it too much, then they would not want it. We have this very popular idea about love that if you want it too much, if you go towards it, the other person goes away from you. So you got to act aloof, you got to act like you don't want them to have them come towards you. It doesn't work like that, right? This is an idea that's coming from the place of shame around wanting something in life, shame around being someone who can also want things, who can want people, who can love, and who can expect that love to be reciprocated. We always want to be people who do not need anything ever, who do not need anyone ever. Because there is a certain kind of an idea that we have associated with wanting or needing something or someone in life. And that is that if you're wanting or needing something, you're too needy, you're too vulnerable, you're too desperate, you're too weak. And that's how the world is going to look at it. There's nothing sexy about wanting someone. That's not true. There's nothing more sexy than seeing your partner desire you, right? But we've got it the wrong way because we have associated shame with it. And again, where does this come from? This comes from when we are children and when we're our most vulnerable selves. And we go to our parents with all our neediness because that's what we are. We're a lump of flesh at the time who's just extremely needy, we're dependent on these people for our survival. There's nothing that we can do on our own to ensure our survival. So we're dependent on these people. And when we go to them in all our vulnerability, with all our neediness, and then if we get rejected, right? We get filled with embarrassment and shame. And then we start to do the same thing with ourselves as we grow up and become adults. We start to shame ourselves every time we have certain needs. And you see how we so carelessly throw around these words onto ourselves and onto the people that we love the most when we call them needy, clingy, desperate. And there's so much shame attached to these words. What we don't understand is that this kind of so called needy, clingy, desperate behavior comes from the place of sheer deprivation. For someone to long for connection, long for a partner, long for love so much, you need to see that how much of starvation or deprivation they must be coming from. Whenever we call people needy or clingy, that's because we're not understanding the magnitude of deprivation that was there. So if we're not doing that, then we're not using trauma informed language. We're not aware of where this person is coming from. So when there is shame in our childhood, for example, today the child is feeling very sick and wants to be looked after, wants a lot of physical affection, wants to be hugged and touched and taken care of by the parents. The parents are oblivious, neglectful, are busy in their own world, of course, well intended. Something else kept them busy in a way that they couldn't cater to what the child is wanting right now. So the child goes up to the parents and, shares the expectation. Mom, I'm not feeling okay. I want to be hugged. Papa, I want this. I don't feel well. And still, if gone unnoticed, then you develop a lot of shame and a weird kind of a withdrawal um, from that particular parent. And then you never want to put yourself in that position again. And you won't even know what is at play when you're doing that. You hate to be in that space where you end up in a position where you can be vulnerable. You start to fear being someone who would need something or someone in life. You hate being in that space. And ironically enough, yet again, you end up finding partners who will judge you and shame you every time you would be needy, every time you would express your needs or expectations. Why? Why would you go after people who would judge you and shame you for it and not be accepting? Because this kind of behavior is familiar. As much as you want to avoid it, you will end up avoiding only you being vulnerable, but you cannot avoid having such people come into your life because that's that's something that your nervous system is aware of. Your nervous system knows how that person and that reaction feels in your bones and in your skin. And it's so familiar a reaction that you can't help but go back to it, even though it creates a lot of unpleasant emotions, right? And the more you experience that in life, the more you get scared of being in that position where you want someone and you have needs. And the more you try to build that wall where you go like, I don't need anything, I'm okay on my own. That's why people act aloof. That's why people act that I don't need anyone, I'm okay on my own, I can be alone, and I in fact like being alone. I'm a loner and I don't like to be with other people. So the moment they tell themselves this narrative acts as a bunker for them. So they can go into that bunker and they can find safety, and they will not be hurt by anyone. And it's a lie, but right? It's a lie that we convince ourselves of, but it's a lie that we want to use to safeguard ourselves, because our early experiences with our parents has made this place such a scary place to be in. So when intimacy becomes the place of both joy and fear, we find people in this position where they're sometimes going towards it and sometimes they're running away from it, because as much as they want it and they know that they're going to enjoy it, and it'll be very blissful an experience, they're also terribly scared of it. So when you love something as much as you're scared of it, there's going to be going towards, running away, going towards, running away. You yourself are going to be very confused as to what you're doing. So your relationships are going to be very complicated, and you will be very complicated, and this will be told to you many times, which will further make you feel more ashamed, and then the cycle continues. So this is the second fear, the fear of being rejected when you have needs. The third fear is, no, sorry. So this is the second fear, that you will be shamed if you have needs. And then the third and the ultimate fear that there's barely anyone who's not affected by is the fear of rejection or fear of being abandoned. Again, going back to your childhood, when you've had neglectful parents, when you've had parenting where you were abandoned or neglected as a child emotionally, where you were not protected by your father in a way that they respected your emotional needs and they protected you emotionally, where you were not given compassion by your mother, where she was kind and sensitive to what you want at what point in life, you become very scared of being in this place, right? Because getting rejected, being abandoned, makes you feel that there's something terribly wrong with me. People, when come out of this fear, they develop belief systems about themselves that I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of respect. I'm not worthy of someone reciprocating love in a relationship. I'm not worthy of commitment in a relationship. I'm not worthy of all the good things in life. Why? Because at a very early age, when children don't get the kind of love that they need from the parents, the three basic needs that every child has is to be seen, to be heard, and to be authentically expressed to. When these needs are not met, the child automatically, because of egocentric thinking, start to think that, oh, if these needs are not being met, it's my fault. There's something wrong with me. And that feeling then gets transferred to your relationships as well. So people like this are very easily apologetic in relationships. They're very guilt prone. They easily take blame on themselves, and they are the kind of people who very easily get gaslighted in a relationship as well. So again, you see that for them also the place of intimacy is a place. So as long as I'm not connected to you, as long as I'm not intimate with you emotionally, I don't have to fear you rejecting me. But the moment I get intimate with you, I have given you the power where you can disapprove of me, you can reject me, you can abandon me, and it's really going to affect me, right? So for these people, commitment issues exist because they think that the day I commit, the moment I commit, I give you the power to do with me anything you want. And I am very scared of giving someone that power because I've had it being used against me in a terrible manner in my childhood and then later on in my relationships as well. And these people have a pattern of having commitment issues, not just in their romantic relationships, but also with their friends, with their with their peers, they always have this kind of an equation where they're constantly fearing. You know how you must have heard a lot of times college students say this a lot, that but she was my best friend and then this third person came in, and it's such a difficult position to be in. People hate to be in that position, right? We today very easily feel abandoned and very easily feel triggered by someone choosing someone else over us, right? And that's really the worst position to be in. What is that? That is also the fear of abandonment and rejection arising. So what do people start saying? I don't believe in this concept of best friends. You shouldn't have one friend, you should have a lot of friends, so that you're not too attached with anyone. This is fear of rejection talking, right? This is fear of commitment talking. Because when I commit to you, I don't look at the joy that comes with it. I look at how, oh, now I can get rejected. Get ready for all the hurt. This is what you've signed up for. So this is what it looks like to people who've had such traumas in their childhood.
Okay. And Praneeth, like you said, that there's almost this wall that this, sitting behind. And since I'm sure this conversation is kind of knocking around that wall a little bit, and it can be overwhelming for a few people. So at this moment, what would you like to say to anyone who's probably in this position and is hearing you out?
Right. Um, I'd say that, that wall is going to get hit and it's going to be cracked down, because that wall is a lie. It's a wall that you've created around yourself to safeguard yourself, which is fine, which is something that you can do for as long as you want. But if that wall narrates a story that I don't want people, I don't want all this, I'm okay being on my own, then no, then you have to be honest to yourself and call it what it is, which is that it's a lie. Now, to understand that it's a lie and to look at it in the face and feel overwhelmed, right? What to do? So, here's what we need to do: we need to make room for and capacity for that kind of to face those fears. Because, if on the other side of the vulnerability there's hurt and there's pain and there's heartbreak, then on that same side, there is also connection and belongingness and joy and success and everything else that we celebrate in life. There is no joy, there is no success, there is no love, there is no connection, there's no belongingness without being vulnerable. We gotta take that risk. We gotta take that emotional risk. And that emotional risk is to not know what's going to happen, to walk into it without guarantee, but to yeah, without guarantee, with all that anxiety and fear, you'll be lying to yourself if you tell yourself that, yeah, no, I'm cool with it. I can do vulnerability. No one can do vulnerability. It's scary. It's shit scary. You want to always run away. It's full of anxiety. And that's what it is. And that's exactly what we need to embrace. We need to know what we're stepping into and what it feels like. It's not going to feel amazing on the first day. It's going to be shit scary. It's going to be like a horror movie, right? But what do you do in horror movies? You keep getting scared and yet you keep watching it. And you keep sitting through that movie till the end of it when you realize, oh, there wasn't any ghost anyway. Um, that's what you need to do with your emotions as well. We need to learn to build capacity for these emotions. These emotions were developed as our scariest nightmares at a very early age in life. And because we were in our formative years in those at that point, we have entered in this position where we just don't want to face these emotions ever again. And they might not be as scary, but the anticipation of it, and to think that what will happen if I go in it, that is more scary, right? So the idea is, it's only when we face it, it's only when we stop lying to ourselves and start making more room and more capacity for the real emotions, is when we start to build potential to go through these emotions as well.
Now, talking about the other side of the dice, what about people who have engaged with these people who have commitment issues, who are in a relationship with them? What is it for them?
um if all these traumas that we talked about that lead to commitment issues. If your partner does not know your traumas, if you don't know that your partner has actually had to go through all of this and that's why they fear commitment, and that it's not personal, it's not about you, it's about them and their triggers and their traumas. When you don't know that, you don't know your partner's love language. When you don't know your partner's love language, you take everything in a relationship personally. Everything that your partner does or doesn't do is your fault, and it's happening because you're a certain way. That's how your mind perceives it. So if my partner is not committing to me, I'm not commitment worthy. If I'm living with the belief system that I don't deserve love when my partner doesn't commit to me, that belief system gets even more strengthened, right? I start to doubt myself. I think that I am not worthy enough. I'm not good enough. There's something horribly, terribly wrong with me. And everything gets worse when the partner who didn't commit to me has now gone forward and committed to this another person. And now, I don't know, they're moving in together, they're getting married, they're stepping on the next step on the ladder. And that makes me question why, if you could do it with her or him, why couldn't you do it with me? That means there's definitely something wrong with me. And you can't help but point out yourself and your own flaws. And then you hate yourself for doing that. You hate it that this person has so much power on me even today that I'm thinking about why they did what they did and I'm blaming myself for it. We keep shaming ourselves for doing that, and yet we keep doing that, and it's just a terrible place to be in. So, for someone who's at the receiving end of such commitment issues coming from another partner, it's just the worst place to be in. That is, if you're not aware of why the partner is doing what they're doing. So you will either be very apologetic and you will start blaming yourself a lot, or you will decide that I'm going to change into a rehabilitation center, happens mostly with women, and I'm going to change this person into becoming someone who's not commitment phobic anymore. I'm going to change it because, again, an idea that is called magical thinking, right? We talked about it in our previous sessions as well, that um, children have magical thinking, that one day something will happen and everything will change. Um, but as we grow up, this magical thinking goes away. Except if we are coming from dysfunctional families, we continue to think in these ways. How? When parents tell the children, look what you did. Look, you made your mother angry. Look, because of you, your father is so upset today and he beat the shit out of me. Look, because of you, we're going through so much today. Because you spent so much, we're broke today. So when children are blamed like this, they develop this thought process, a dysfunctional thought process, that a particular behavior, a particular person, a particular act can have so much power that it can entirely change the reality of something. So that's where we, even when we grow up and become adults, we follow the magical thinking rule book where we go like, if I get this one job, my life will be sorted. If this one person walks into my life, I will be okay. If this one thing changes, life is good, happily ever after. And the movies and the fairy tales, they reinforce these belief systems all the more in us. And what do we see in these fairy tales? That this man has always been super scared of commitment and was very phobic, or this woman who was only all about career and was very practical. And then one day, one person came along, you know, their perfect partner, and they didn't see it. They were fighting with them. They didn't believe them until this one day that they fell madly in love with, and suddenly they were not commitment phobic anymore. Suddenly all their fears went away. And we always want to be that protagonist. We always want to be that person who brings about that change in someone's life as women. And as men, we want to find the right partner, the right man, talking about heterosexual couples, but anyone can take up this role in a homosexual couple, right? Where we then, as men, we wait that um, there's going to be a lot of wandering around and tasting all kinds of waters. And then until this one day, one person would walk into my life, and then I would not want to hover around anymore. I wouldn't want to wander around anymore. And then I would want to settle down. Then I would like what, then that person will change it all for me. That person will make me delete all the other dating apps that I have. That person will make me unfollow all the women that I'm following on Instagram, right? So that's our idea. And we keep holding on to this idea, right? We keep thinking that I'm going to change this person. So for people who are at the receiving end of it, they're either heartbroken, devastated, full of self-doubt, or they're trying to fix and change this person in a way that I'm going to fix you. I'm going to change you in a way where you won't be commitment phobic anymore. And then I will bear its fruits for the rest of our lives in our relationship.
So, Praneeth, how does one really deal with this anxiety around commitment then?
You see, we've talked about how there are three kinds of fear, right? There is fear of losing yourself emotionally. There is fear of being shamed. There is fear of being rejected and abandoned. Now, because of these fears and how we've been brought up by our parents, there are a lot of unhealthy patterns that we learn, a lot of distorted belief systems that we hold on to. What we need to do to not be commitment phobic and to not live with the anxiety of it is to unlearn these belief systems. So, what are these belief systems? To begin with, first belief system that if I get attached, I will lose myself, right? In that case, how do we unlearn this? Is to recognize that that is not what vulnerability is. To be vulnerable does not mean to give up everything and go after a person like the only thing in your life. That's not what vulnerability looks like. In fact, vulnerability without boundaries is not even vulnerability, it's just disclosure. So, what these people need to learn and how to unlearn this idea that I will lose myself if I'm vulnerable is to learn the concept of boundaries. That you have to be vulnerable, but you have to be vulnerable with boundaries. What does that mean? That means that you're not just going to pour your heart out to anyone, subtle advertisement there, you know. You will not do that. You will factor in what that person is like. You will check with yourself, with your gut, with your authentic self that do I want to do this with this person? Is there anything that they've done that looks like a red flag that I've been overlooking and I'm still going ahead and doing it with them even though they've not earned the right? Then I am trespassing my own boundaries. So it's not vulnerability that's all wrong. It's when we don't pair vulnerability up with boundaries when things go haywire. Vulnerability, vulnerability does not mean going out with no reins and just becoming like some sort of a wild person. That's not how it is, right? It is, in fact, to be so aware that you're checking that this is such a sensitive information. It's my asset, my emotions. Who do I want to share that with? Who deserves that? So you take it slow, you take your time, and then you see that has this person earned the right to my vulnerability or not? If they've not, if I have even a teensy bit of doubt, I will take my own time. Second belief system that if I love, I will get rejected, I can get rejected, and that will hurt. Ultimately, love will hurt, right? So, this idea needs to be unlearned. We've seen that if you look at it, it's not love that hurts, it's following a person chasing after someone with blindfolds on and not looking at the reality and overlooking the red flags. That's what hurts. When you just want to hold on to one person and you just want to run away from your loneliness so bad that you don't want to come to terms with the fact that this relationship is not what I want, this person is not the right fit for me. You don't want to look at it because with at every chance of getting a potential partner in your life, you jump and you're like, this is it, let me just grab it, it might not come my way again. So it's because of that anxiety that we rush in, we overlook all the red flags, and that's what hurts. Overlooking the red flags hurt, right? Love doesn't hurt. That needs to be unlearned. And lastly, the belief system that if I let people in, they can disapprove of me. They can say something that will hurt me so much. So I will rather have people come into my life and stay at a distance, even if I at the end of the day I feel I don't even have a soul to talk to. I'm fine with that. than to allow someone to come in, get in the insides of me and then say something or do something that really hurts me. Here we need to work on our shame, right? Sometimes we fear intimacy because we're too afraid of someone coming so close that they will look at even the sides of ourselves that we don't want to show to anyone, you know. And we think that it's because of these very things that people are going to reject us because we reject ourselves for those particular things. For example, let's say that someone thinks that I'm too sensitive, that they are too sensitive, that, I am too, I get emotional very easily and I cry a lot. And this other person will think that I'm a mess. So if someone gets too close and if they see me cry, they're going to reject me and they will leave me because I judge myself when I cry because I was judged when I was a child. A lot of clients, since we're all doing online sessions now, a lot of clients switch off their camera when they're crying, or they're like, ma'am, someone's on the door, I'll come back. And then they go, they cry, and then they come back, and then we have a chat about it, and then they say that it's so awkward for me to cry in front of someone. I can't cry on camera like that, it's so weird. What will happen if you see me cry? And then I ask them, what will happen if I see you cry? And then they have no answer because there is just this unprocessed inherent fear that if someone sees me cry, that's it for me. They'll leave me, they'll reject me. So this is what we need to do. We need to unlearn these distorted thought processes, absolutely dysfunctional thinking patterns that we adopted because our parents brought us up in a certain way, or they had certain fears and certain perceptions. And to deal with the anxiety around commitment issues, we just need to unlearn all this.
All right. With that, we come to a close of episode 7 of Pour the Heart Out. We really hope that there's something that you're taking home from this conversation because I definitely am. And we'll see you next week with another episode and another theme. Till then, keep pouring your heart out.